One of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's most significant engagement will take place today. It is the second India-Nordic summit. Prime Minister Modi will take meetings with the leaders of Sweden, Finland, Iceland and Norway, together with Denmark. These countries form the Nordic Five, small countries, but economic powerhouses they are. The collective GDP of the Nordic Five is $1.8 trillion. That's bigger than that of Russia. Russia's GDP is $1.5 trillion. Now, the first India-Nordic summit was held in Stockholm back in 2018. Prime Minister Modi will meet the prime ministers of the 5 countries together and then separately as well. The significance of this summit can be gauged by the fact that the United States is the only other country with which the Nordic states engage with at a summit level. On the agenda of this summit will be the post-pandemic economic recovery, climate change, innovation and technology, renewable energy, and India-Nordic cooperation in the Arctic region, not to mention, of course, the Ukraine war. Engagement between Europe and India has increased. Foreign ministers from European nations have visited India, marking a push for growing strategic and economic cooperation. The Prime Minister's visit could set the stage for the India-EU summit, likely boosting the free trade agreement negotiations between the two. Later on, Prime Minister Modi is also set to meet French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris. India and France have a strategic partnership since 1998. The two share a robust economic partnership as well as defense cooperation. And joining us live on this broadcast is Ambassador Sudhir T. Devare, former Indian Ambassador to Ukraine, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs from New Delhi. We're also being joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, live from Copenhagen. Thank you for joining us. Starting with you, Siddhant, after a jam-packed day that Indian Prime Minister Modi had yesterday, what further engagements are scheduled? We know of the India-Nordic summit, of course. What can you tell us about the plan going forward?
Well, today is the last day of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Europe visit, but again a very packed visit and covers 2 cities, Copenhagen and Paris, which is happening later in the day. But here in Copenhagen, it's just around 7 a.m. and at around 9 a.m. all the activities start. 2 key activities, one of course the bilateral meetings with other Nordic countries. We know that yesterday the Prime Minister had a full-fledged bilateral and press statements with the Denmark Prime Minister, in which the focus we saw was on green strategic partnership. So today will not be different, given the fact that how these the 5 Nordic countries are world leaders when it comes to innovation, renewables, issues relating to climate change. So after that bilateral, it's the Nordic summit, where of course the format brings together the 5 Nordic countries, which share a lot of things in common in terms of culture, in terms of technology, in terms of renewable resources, in terms of high standard of living. And with India, they cooperate. We know, as you have pointed out, that barring US, India is the only country with which the Nordic countries have such a format. And under this format, there are a lot of deliverables that are expected. But as the day progresses, it is Paris that will be the focus, with the meeting between the Indian Prime Minister and the French President. In fact, the menu at the official residence of the French President is vegetarian today in honor of the Indian Prime Minister. But on the table, of course, will be focused on Atmanirbhar Bharat, also Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific and several other issues.
All right, Siddhant. Now coming to you, Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. How do you assess the significance of the second India-Nordic summit?
Well, India and the Nordic countries always had traditional and very friendly relations, be it innovation, science and technology. Nordic investments in India go back for decades, and therefore formalizing this into Indo-Nordic summit in 2018 was a very positive development, and I'm very happy to see that the second summit is taking place. Green strategic partnership between these countries and India is of great importance, particularly as we are now dealing with issues like climate change, green technologies, and Arctic Ocean issues also, which will be discussed during this summit. So I think this summit by itself is of considerable importance. The discussions which Prime Minister yesterday had with the Danish Prime Minister on Ukraine were also of particular importance, because it seems that it is the first time that a European leader has very clearly articulated and explained, the position, and in fact asked India or mentioned India's expectations from India about the present situation in Ukraine. Both talked about the need for dialogue and diplomacy to resolve this problem, the line which India has been mentioning all along.
Right.
And you see, the European perspective on Ukraine has all along been very different. Only now I think it seems to be fall in line with that of the US. And therefore, when European Union countries are asking for ceasefire, end to war, I think for them the imperative to end this situation, end the war, and bring the situation to normalcy is tremendous importance.
Right.
Even on the NATO membership, both Finland and Sweden currently being talked about to be applying for membership. I'm not sure whether they are doing very voluntarily, because the countries which have remained neutral for last 70 years now seeking NATO membership is out of sheer compulsion because of the continuation of the war which is going on, and that's why I think they asked the Prime Minister to see what influence. One more point is that the humanitarian problem is staring in the eyes of whole Europe. In Ukraine, and the number of refugees which are pouring into East Europe and also Nordic countries, Western Europe, I think this is going to be a huge problem for all these countries, and therefore I think the European dimension of this problem will need to be taken very closely into account, and I think India can pay attention to this.
Absolutely. Right. Ambassador, do stay on with us. Siddhant, coming to you now. Again, I would like to ask you the same. You know, this is happening in the backdrop of the Ukraine war. India has maintained its stance. This is something which, of course, is featured prominently in the discussions. What can you tell us about this?
Well, there is a strong shadow of the Russian invasion of Ukraine along the entire visit, whether it's in Berlin or Copenhagen. In Copenhagen, yesterday, we saw twice the Denmark Prime Minister talking about this issue. First, of course, at the press statement, strongly slamming Russia, but also, interestingly, at the diaspora event, which, of course, was a happy event, to use the word, in terms of celebration of the relationship. But she made a point to talk about this issue and how democracies needs to come together. And saying this when we know that there was a significant number of Indian diaspora member present, the Indian Prime Minister present, and we know that the similar thing, not at the diaspora event, but at the press statements happened in Berlin, where the German Chancellor had strongly slammed Putin. But if you look at what India has been saying, what the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been saying, not only he has been reiterating what India has been saying, calling for cessation of the hostilities, and also saying that it's time for direct talks. Remember, Indian Prime Minister has spoken to President Putin and President Zelensky many times, calling for direct talks, but also making a point to say that nobody is victorious when it comes to wars. This is something that was one of the key takeaways of his comments here in Berlin, and of course what we saw in Copenhagen yesterday. So when later on he goes to Paris, or whether it's the India-Nordic summit, we do expect reiteration of India's stance, but also an evolution of India's stance we have seen since the invasion started on 24th of February. Because remember, India condemned the Busha killings. India has been calling for the respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity, though without mentioning Ukraine's name. So India has been following its long-standing policy, but also at a time we know that India has good relationship with Moscow, given that it has a strong, one of the strong pillars of the relationship is defense.
Right, Siddhant. Ambassador, coming back to you, thank you so much for staying with us. Now, we know that Europe's energy and oil dependence, this has become a key area of discussion as well. Now, what are your expectations with regards to that, and also India's role in green energy projects and technology innovation?
Well, German dependence on Russian oil and gas and coal is now much talked about, and even today, after about 70 days after war, Germany is still importing huge quantities of energy from Russia. Although now they have declared that over the next few weeks and months, they will reduce the imports. All that doesn't really help the West Europeans much. The Russians have already stopped supply of gas to Bulgaria and Poland because of the problem on the payment of dues in rubles. Now, Europe would like to see that this gas and oil relationship is again continued, or it is not terminated the way it is being done. And this is possible only if the war between Ukraine and Russia comes to an end. So I think all efforts in Europe will be directed towards that. Germany, which was initially taking a position to mediate, Chancellor Scholz went to Moscow several times to plead for a solution to this problem. Have now shifted in the last 2 months from that position to increase the defense budget of Germany, or sending even heavy equipment to Ukraine. So I think all this is, I think Europe finds it very difficult to really sustain. And therefore, energy being the key element, key ingredient in the relationship between Europe and Russia, I think in the views of these countries need to be sustained, because I think it is a win-win situation for both. As far as the green energy is concerned, Scandinavian countries, the Nordic countries had always taken a lead. Even in respect of climate change, Denmark had taken initiative, and you had the Copenhagen meeting a few years ago in this regard. Innovation has been their strong point. They are the ones who have done their best to maintain very high standards of environment. I think countries like India can benefit a great deal from cooperation in the field of green energy with countries like Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and others.
Right.
I think this is an area of great promise to us. And as I mentioned earlier, the Arctic dimension, with which naturally Nordic countries are very well versed with, also we'll have to explore, because it is an ocean which has a future for the world.
All right. All right, Ambassador Devre and also Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.